Why is there a blinking box under my car? I muttered, squinting beneath the chassis. The flashlight shook a little in my hand arthritis age, or maybe something worse. I shifted on the gravel, adjusting my old sweatshirt, and there it was. A black box. Magnetic. Still warm. The kind of warmth that doesn't come from the sun, but from use. I didn't scream. Didn't call anyone. I just reached up, peeled it loose, and rolled out from under the car like I'd done it 100 times before. Inside, I placed it in an empty cereal box. Honey Crunch, the one Eli never liked, but always said I should stop buying anyway, and taped the flaps shut. Then I called Leonard, my neighbor, 2 plots down. He was heading out that evening, hauling freight toward Ontario. I asked if he had room for one more parcel. Told him it was a prank for a cousin up north. He chuckled, didn't ask questions. 10 hours later, Eli's phone wouldn't stop ringing. I was in the kitchen sipping coffee when I heard the first call. Then another. And another. He glanced at the screen, then flipped it face down. His shoulders were too still. You said it was for insurance updates, I said without looking at him. Interesting policy. He didn't answer. Just muttered something about checking the mail and stepped outside. The thing is, I hadn't told him about the tracker. I hadn't told anyone. But his face gave it all away. You don't panic over a blinking box unless you know what it does. I rinsed my cup slowly, letting the water run longer than necessary. The room felt too quiet, too calculated. That night, I lay in bed and listened. The hallway creaked. His voice was low. He didn't know I was awake. He didn't know what I'd already started to piece together. He said something about waiting until she signs. I didn't know what he meant yet, but I would. Soon. I'm 66. Been alone for almost 9 years now. Martin's heart gave out one Tuesday morning while he was fixing the garage door. One blink, and that was it. Since then, it's just been me and the quiet. I live in a 1-story house at the end of a gravel road, just past the cattle fencing, where the mailboxes lean like old men at a bar. I grow tomatoes, keep every receipt in labeled envelopes, and still don't trust online banking. My calendar hangs by a single magnet. I write everything in pen. 2 days ago, Eli said he wanted to help upgrade my system, his words, not mine. He brought his laptop, a phone charger I didn't recognize, and some kind of cable he said was industry standard. I was still putting away groceries when he ducked under the car to check something real quick. I didn't think anything of it then. That's what hurts now. I didn't think. He left before dinner. Said he had errands. I waved him off, warmed up soup, and told myself it was nice he'd come by. The next day, I found the tracker. And yesterday, I watched Leonard drive off with it tucked inside a taped cereal box marked Happy Birthday. No one would think to open it. Certainly not Border Patrol. 10 hours later, Eli's phone started buzzing like a trapped hornet in a jar. 5 missed calls? Then 10. He didn't answer any of them. He looked calm on the outside, but I saw the edge in his movements. The way his thumb hovered over the screen. The way he turned toward the wall before speaking. He tried to act like nothing was wrong. Asked if I needed anything from the store. I said no. I already had what I needed. That night, when he thought I was asleep, I stood behind the hallway wall and listened. He said, "Just wait. She hasn't signed yet." I went back to bed and stared at the ceiling, waiting for morning. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. Just stood there in the dark, one hand pressed flat against the hallway wall, the other clutched in the folds of my robe. Eli's voice carried in low waves from the living room, the sound of his socked feet shifting on the wood floor. He was pacing 4 steps, turn 4 steps back. "She mailed it to Canada," he whispered clearly into his phone. "I don't know how she figured it out." Silence. Then after a pause, "Just wait. She hasn't signed yet." My breath caught. Signed what he wasn't worried I'd been tracked. He was worried the tracker hadn't finished its job. My stomach knotted tight and sick. He was supposed to be my son, my only one. The baby I'd carried alone after Martin's deployment. The one I stayed up with through croup bullies, heartbreaks, even that business idea that wiped out his savings. I'd helped him rebuild after every mess. Always without judgment. Always with a hand ready. And now, here he was, speaking like I was a delay. An obstacle. Like there was something he needed from me, but couldn't just ask. I backed away, careful not to let the floor creak. When I got to my room, I closed the door without a sound and sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't sleep, just stared into the dark, trying to put the pieces together. The next morning, I made coffee like usual. Let the screen door slam a little louder. Acted like nothing had shifted. Eli asked if I wanted him to pick up stamps from the post office. I said no. He smiled too quickly, like he was relieved. Then he offered to run by the bank if I needed anything deposited. I said no to that too. My voice was even, but inside, something had cracked. And once it cracked, something cold and clear had started to move through me. After he left, I opened the drawer where I kept all my mail. 2 bank statements were gone. The drawer where I kept my pension files had been touched. I could tell. The folders weren't in the order I'd had them, alphabetical, color-coded, clipped with metal tabs. Now they sat slightly askew, too clean in some places, too smudged in others. The kind of neatness that only happens after a stranger's hands have been there. I checked my mail stack. The electricity bill was there. So was the water notice, but both bank statements were gone. I don't throw those out. I never have. I've kept everyone since 2003. That's when I called Gina. She'd handled our will after Martin passed, handled the land transfer when I sold the second lot. Sharp as glass and just as clear. I need you to run a title search, I told her, and check if there's any power of attorney paperwork filed under my name. She didn't ask why. Gina wasn't the kind of woman who needed the drama spelled out. There was a pause. Longer than it should have been. Then finally, Corliss. I think we need to meet, face to face. I hung up and sat at the table staring at the place where Eli usually parked his car. It was one thing to find a tracker, one thing to hear whispers through the wall, but now documents were missing. Financial ones. And I'd never granted anyone permission to touch those. I pulled out the old manila folder with my deed, made a copy of my most recent pension deposit slip, took pictures of everything and loaded them onto a USB I hadn't used in years. By the time the sun set, I had my purse packed, my documents sealed in an envelope, and a list of every file I needed Gina to check. If Eli or Lacey were rewriting something behind my back, I'd find the original draft and the pen they used. The next morning, I stopped by the mechanic on my way to Gina's office. Told him I had a hunch something more had been done to my car. You're lucky, the mechanic muttered, his voice muffled beneath the car. Really lucky you found it when you did. I stood near the open hood, arms crossed. My stomach had been in knots since I left Gina's office, and his words didn't help. He slid out on the dolly and pointed with his flashlight. See these fresh scratches along the frame? And this, he tapped at a small exposed port near the fuse box. Tampered. Someone pried it open, then closed it again. Quick and messy. I opened my purse and pulled out the photo I'd taken, grainy but clear. The black box. The blinking red light. I handed it to him without a word. He took one glance and let out a low whistle. That's no standard tracker. This model. It connects to your car's onboard system, can shut down your engine while you're driving, lock you inside from a distance. All it takes is a paired phone. Something inside me turned to ice. That wasn't just about knowing where you were, he added. That was about controlling where you could go, or stopping you altogether. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My hands were steady, but I felt a deep throb in my chest, part fear, part clarity. Eli had been in this garage with me 2 weeks ago. He'd offered to check my battery, said he was just helping. I thanked the mechanic, paid in cash, and drove away slowly, careful, with every stoplight. When I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car staring at the porch where Eli once helped Martin hang Christmas lights. Then I went to the safe in the back bedroom, the one behind the false panel in the closet, the one only Martin and I ever knew about. I took out the original deed, our joint will, and the envelope labeled insurance. Confidential. Inside was a clause I hadn't looked at in years, my name, my house, and a life insurance policy I never canceled. Lacey always smiled like she'd already won. Even when she offered to help with dishes, even when she complimented my pie, there was something tight behind her teeth, a performance, not warmth. She once called me sweet in front of the mailman with that tone you use for limping strays. Back then I let it slide. Now I know better. Gina met me at her office, her brow already furrowed before I sat down. They filed a power of attorney 2 weeks ago, she said. It's been notarized, electronically. I didn't do it. She slid a copy across the desk. I didn't even need to read the name to know who was behind it. I remembered that moment, clear as day. Lacey hovering near the printer in my kitchen. She'd asked me to sign something for Eli's business loan paperwork. It was bundled with 2 other forms. She tapped the signature line and said, "Don't worry, we'll file it for you, Corliss." The way she smiled like I was already out of the way. Gina flipped to the last page. They added it to a refinance application. Your house was used as collateral for a $282 loan. I didn't blink. I didn't gasp. 12 years ago, that mortgage was paid in full, I said. Martin and I made the last payment the week before his surgery. I know, she replied softly. They're counting on you not remembering the fine print. I folded the documents neatly, slipped them into my folder. What happens if I revoke it? They'll panic, she said, and probably escalate. I nodded. Then we don't warn them. On the drive home, I didn't turn the radio on, just silence and the gravel humming under the tires. At a stoplight, I saw a bakery Lacey loved. I parked, walked inside, and asked for a plain box. Empty. Just a box. Back at home, I packed it with everything I didn't want them to find: copies, originals, passwords. I labeled it holiday recipes and tucked it beneath the floorboard in the laundry room. Tomorrow, I'd make my move. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a fight. I acted. By 10 that morning, Gina had filed the revocation paperwork with the county clerk. The forged power of attorney was no longer valid. I sat beside her as she submitted the affidavit. Watched every click. By noon, I was at the bank. I told the clerk, young, polite, oblivious, that I wanted every joint account frozen until further notice. She tried to call Eli for confirmation. I slid her the paperwork with my lawyer's stamp. Then I drove to the recorder's office and moved the deed. Not to Eli. Not to anyone. I transferred it into a living trust under my maiden name, Noreen Calloway. No one would think to look there. Not them. At home, I left a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to visit Aunt Millie. Don't wait up. They didn't know there'd never been an Aunt Millie. She was someone I made up years ago, a name I used at checkout lines when I didn't want to talk about my personal life. She'd always been fiction. Today, she became my shield. I packed a single overnight bag. Clothes. Documents. The recipe box that wasn't a recipe box. I fed the cat, locked the back door, and took the long way out of town, past the post office, past the school Eli once attended, past the oak tree Martin planted the year we got married. By the time they realized I wasn't home, I was 3 counties over. I checked into a roadside inn under a different name and paid in cash. I kept the curtains closed. Phone off. In that room, I laid out every document like a puzzle. The will, the house deed, the insurance policy, my pension history. The recording Gina had helped me pull from the security camera in my hallway, Eli's voice clear as day. Just wait, he'd said. She hasn't signed yet. I took a pen and circled the signature line I never touched. The bank manager adjusted his glasses and leaned closer to the paper between us. His fingers hovered above the signature line like he didn't want to touch it. "This isn't yours," he said finally. "No," I replied. "But your branch notarized it." He didn't deny it. Just swallowed, then reached for a small notepad, writing something I couldn't see. I didn't need to. The look on his face told me enough this was going to be a problem for them now, not just for me. At the sheriff's office, Gina played the recording. Eli's voice filled the room too casual to be rehearsed. "She hasn't signed yet," he said, then laughed. "We'll get the house early. She won't even know what hit her." The deputy leaned forward in his chair. He didn't smile, didn't speak. Just stared at the screen, then asked us to replay it, twice. Then Gina handed him a flash drive. There's more. Security cam footage silent, black and white but clear. Lacey, in my kitchen, facing the printer, my email open on the laptop, her fingers moving quickly. The timestamp matched the day the forged documents were submitted. I watched the deputy's pen pause mid-note. "That enough?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "It's enough to start. They didn't cuff anyone. Not yet. This wasn't a television drama. This was real, where paperwork not shouting does the damage." Outside, Gina handed me back the original file. "You sure you want to go home?" she asked. "No," I said. "I want them to come to me." And find the locks changed. We stood there a moment longer. Then I turned, walked to the car, and felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't fear anymore. This was forward motion. By nightfall, I had an appointment with a locksmith and a plan to put every remaining asset behind a barrier no forged signature could breach. They didn't call to say they were sorry. They called to explain. "It was just for your safety," Eli said. His voice was low measured like he'd rehearsed it. "We worried you'd fall or something." "You're alone, Mom." I didn't interrupt. I let him finish. Let him get all the concern out of his system. "No," I said calmly. "You wanted access. And you didn't want to ask." He went quiet. I could hear Lacey's voice faintly in the background, sharp and fast, like she didn't realize the call hadn't ended yet. "Mom, we didn't mean," he started again. I hung up. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. I let it go to voicemail. The third time I answered and said, "Please stop calling," then ended the line before they could say anything at all. I didn't need more words. I had the papers. I had the audio. I had the filings and the video timestamps and the notary's weak excuses. I had the truth. I'd lived through the answer long before the question was even asked. At some point, their love had twisted into something else. Something calculating. A hand on my shoulder that only reached for my purse. I couldn't say when the shift happened. Maybe they didn't even notice it themselves. But I did. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched the wind move through the trees. Across the street, a couple walked a dog. Their daughter trailed behind, hopping between sidewalk cracks. I remembered walking Eli like that once, holding his hand, telling him not to step on the lines. I closed the curtain. By morning, I'd have the locks changed. By the end of the week, everything would be transferred: my pension, my insurance, my will. Not erased, just removed from their reach. 3 weeks later, I came back. No warning, no announcement. Just me pulling into the driveway with a quiet engine and a key that no longer worked. They had changed the locks just as I expected. I unlocked them anyway. The locksmith met me at 9 sharp. By 10, everything was changed again, this time under a different code, with a new deadbolt no one else had the combination for. Not even Gina. Just me. I walked through the house slowly. The air was stale, but it was still mine. There were traces of them. A pair of shoes by the door, a grocery list half finished on the fridge, a phone charger still plugged into the wall. I didn't touch any of it. Every document had been corrected by then. The title was mine again, this time inside a trust that only I controlled. The power of attorney had been revoked and reported. The fraudulent refinance voided. The insurance policy sealed and shifted to a secure vault with my attorney's name on it, my maiden name on every line. Even the bank statements now bore a note. No third-party access permitted under any circumstances. The yard had overgrown while I was gone. Vines crept along the fence posts, and the tomato plants had withered from neglect. I didn't clean it up. I let it stay wild. Some things grow back stronger after a storm if you leave them alone long enough. Some things don't need pruning to survive. They need space. I made tea. I sat at the window, and I listened to the wind roll over the roof like it always had. There were no apologies. No knock at the door. Just quiet. I didn't need their return to feel at home. I was never gone. I was only waiting to see what was mine, what still belonged to me once the noise had cleared.